During my episode review for Bleach episode 4 titled Kill the Shadow, I had praised it as one of my favorite episodes that we have received thus far. Now, there is a lot to love and praise about this particular episode, as we had everything from stunning visuals to anime exclusive scenes and extended fight sequences. Now, where to begin, as the 4th episode of the 1000 Year Blood War arc adapts material from chapters 495 to 499, spanning a total of 5 chapters. There were changes made to the sequence of events and how they had unfolded within the anime in comparison to the manga, as well as several scenes that were cut for the sake of pacing and to avoid two characters repeating the same line but in different ways. I believe that this approach that the anime staff are going with ensures that this new anime remains to be all killer and no filler, and it focuses on adapting everything but the unnecessary moments so that they can include longer fights and faster pacing where it is needed. Now, the 4th episode begins with a 2 or so minute recap, going over the events of episodes 1 to 3, and we don't really get to see any new material until after the opening song. Episode 4 starts by adapting the final page of chapter 494, which was left off of the last episode, where the Soul Society's Research and Development Institute analyze and give a briefing on all of the casualties and destruction that has been inflicted across the Soul Society. Now, during this very panic-filled briefing at the start of the episode, there is an additional line about how they are confused about how the enemy were able to bypass the barrier of the Serete. The next scene is of Hashward confronting the 13th Division, and this particular moment is actually changed around and it is taken from chapter 496, but it is placed early on in the episode before the captains are actually shown to have been confronted by the Sternritters. This change was done so that the defeat of Kojomaru could be used as an impactful start to the episode, as his blood spells out the title card of this week's episode, Kill the Shadow. Also, the anime actually adds this added visual of Kojomaru actually being split into 2, confirming that the Wish.com Aizen is in fact dead. The material from chapter 495 begins at 6 minutes into the episode, as we don't really get to hear the report from the Hell Butterfly that was informing Rose of the current situation. Now, in the manga, we actually get to read about what Rose learns here, as he is told about 27 Shinigami being killed, and that his 3rd, 5th, and 6th seated officer, including his Lieutenant Kira, have all had their spiritual pressures vanish. Now, Kira's spiritual pressure having disappeared is the most important piece of information here, but it does end up being conveyed to us later. The anime, on the other hand, chooses to actually show us the butterfly appear near Rose, but he just says that he understands, and the Hell Butterfly vanishes. Now, this omission doesn't seem to affect the story, because Rose does in fact speak about Kira, and about how he will not be pleased if anything has happened to him just moments later. So it seems like this Hell Butterfly monologue was cut because Rose speaks about how he would react if anything were to happen to Kira anyway. So this change was done for the sake of pacing, and so that the same point will not be repeated twice. When Renji clashes with Asnod, some lines of internal monologue are cut from the anime, where he questions why his attacks are not doing any damage, and he wonders if it's because of some unique ability or an ability that all Quincy can use. Following this, Mask the Masculine attempts to attack Renji, and another internal monologue is cut from the anime here, as Renji thinks to himself that Mask is fast after he evades his first attack, and he is about to be grabbed by him. After Byakuya arrives and he speaks to Renji at the end of chapter 495, one line of dialogue is cut from the anime, where he tells Renji not to show the Quincy any pity. Following this, we get an anime exclusive scene of Mayuri in his private study room, as he comments that the Quincy don't just seal Bankai after he runs a test and it turns out to be negative. Now, you can assume that he had tested Sasakibe's Zanpakuto for traces of Bankai, but it had come back as negative, leading Mayuri to deduce that they can steal Bankai. This is an additional scene that is not found within the manga, as it is revealed later that they can steal Bankai and not just simply seal them, with the 4 captains that had their Bankai stolen. Now, a panel from the beginning of chapter 496 where Byakuya tells Renji not to show the enemy pity is removed from the anime, and this is following the removal of the pity line at the end of chapter 495. In the manga, Byakuya explains to Renji that the enemy had murdered Sasakibe, and they had shed blood within the Serete without any warning. stunning. There is no need to go easy on them or to show them pity. Renji does respond by saying that he wasn't showing them pity, so it kind of makes this scene pretty redundant. But I'd always interpreted this conversation as Byakuya sensing Renji's fear, as he was coming to Asnot's power. That is, until Byakuya had arrived, thus explaining why he was taken aback here, and why it may have seemed to Byakuya that Renji was going easy on the enemy. Also, he had just been protected from an attack by Mask D Masculine, and additionally, he was confused as to why his attacks were not penetrating the enemy's defenses. So there were plenty of reasons for Renji to be flustered, and for the anime to kind of have this dialogue between Byakuya and Renji about him going easy on the enemy or showing them pity. Following the scene where Asnot's arm is cut, there is a scene removed involving Mask D Masculine, where he questions how Asnot could have allowed himself to be hurt through his Blut vein. After the scene where Mask falls into the ground, we get an extended fight sequence between Byakuya and Asnot. They exchange blows in this anime-only scene. We have similar scenes involving Komamura, Hitsugaya, and even briefly Soifon, as they all showcase their Shikai against the enemy, as the anime shows us that the captains need to use their Bankai in order to hurt their opponents or to even have a chance of breaking through their defenses. There are some visually stunning scenes here, like Asnot defending himself by using Blut vein on his eyeball, as well as Bambietta kicking a Reishi ball towards Komamura, and Hitsugaya struggling against Kangdu. We get just under 2 minutes of extended fighting here, before we cut back to the manga material from chapter 496, where Byakuya is about to activate his Bankai. Now, the scene where Byakuya decides to activate his Bankai is handled differently in the anime in comparison to the manga. The manga stylistically cuts through each of the 4 captains, all delivering a monologue about why it is necessary for them to use their Bankai now, as opposed to the anime which cuts this segment down and only has Byakuya really speaking, as even Komamura's lines are given to Byakuya and Soifon and Hitsugaya's lines are actually cut. Also, he ends his monologue by telling Renji that if his Bankai is sealed, then he is to use his own Bankai to defeat the enemy. In the manga, Byakuya actually begins the monologue with this line, in comparison to the anime where it's the last thing that he says before activating his Bankai. Now, this is another example of streamlining material for the sake of pacing and avoiding a one-to-one adaptation of all of the scenes that are in the manga. After Byakuya activates his Bankai, it is completely animated and showcased to us properly with some stunning anime-only visuals, while the other captains' Bankai are just simply released and we get to see them via a single image. The anime also does an excellent job of actually showcasing all of the captain's Bankais being stolen. We get some stunning anime-only visuals where all of the Bankai are broken apart and absorbed by the Quincy's medallions. After their Bankai is stolen, we hit the end of chapter 496 and we reach the midway point of the episode. In the manga, after Yamamoto learns the information from Rangiku's Tentekura in chapter 497, he actually ends up rushing off to the battlefield. But in the anime, he stays put and does nothing, choosing to look on with a somber expression with the dramatic music playing in the background. A scene from chapter 497 where the 13th Division reacts to Hashwar defeating Kajamaru is actually cut from the anime. And this also includes the following scene, where Hashward asks Yhwach what he wants him to do with the surviving Shinigami, and Yhwach tells him to do as he pleases. The start of chapter 498, there is about 3 pages of material that is cut from the anime, and it's all in relation to the Research and Development Institute learning about Ichigo's whereabouts and that he is with Urahara. They are deduced that he doesn't have his Shinigami badge with him, and that it is in Urahara's shop, as Akon assumes that Ichigo is in Huecomundo with Urahara. Now, while this does provide some context, but for the sake of pacing, I do understand why this was cut from the anime. While Akon is speaking to Urahara, he loses his cool, and a scene from the manga of Akon's subordinates commenting on him losing his cool is removed from the anime. One of them says that only Mayuri and Urahara have this ability to annoy Akon this much. After Akon learns that Ichigo is battling a Quincy within Huecomundo, Akon's internal monologue is cut from the anime. The scene has Akon shocked to learn that the Quincy were in Huecomundo, as he wonders how Ichigo was able to realize and deal with them before even the Research and Development Institute had found out. Additionally, after this, Akon asks Urahara how Ichigo is faring against the Quincy, to which Urahara reveals that he is winning. Now, this is also cut from the anime because it isn't really needed, because the following scenes of them fighting, it is made clear that Ichigo is whooping Kilge's ass. Some comedic dialogue from Urahara is cut from their conversation, as Urahara says not to be silly and that it can't just walk into the middle of their fight and get Ichigo's attention. Additionally, Pesce and Dondachaka are seen to comment on Urahara's relaxed demeanor while he is on the phone. Again, this is another comedic moment cut to maintain the serious tone of the series. In the manga, Kilge states that he had received data about not letting Ichigo use Bankai because his Bankai cannot be stolen, but he is frustrated because this is all that it should have been. Now, this thought from Kilge is removed from the anime as it's just a nice piece of context, but it isn't really necessary for the scene. Kilge's internal monologue from the end of chapter 498 is also cut, as he admits that he is struggling to keep up with Ichigo's speed and that he has to keep his defensive blute active while not being given adequate time to activate his offensive blute because of Ichigo's agility and constant attacking pressure. Now, this omitted scene is inconsequential as we learn about Kilge's predicament via Urahara when he breaks down everything that he has learned about the Quincy during his discussion with Akon and Ichigo later on while Ichigo is traveling through the Senkaimon. 2 pages of Ichigo's discussion with Akon in chapter 499 are removed in the anime. Instead, it begins with Ichigo learning that the enemy can steal Bankai instead of him being updated about the casualties, the Sternritters being captain class or stronger, and Ichigo being reassured that Renji and Rukia are safe. When Urahara explains to Ichigo the 3 pieces of information about the Quincy in the manga, he goes into detail with each of them. But in the anime, the information about the Quincy holy form is cut, and he only really goes into a little detail about the Quincy's technique blute, and he briefly mentions its flaws while not giving an example of how he was able to take out Kilge because of this flaw like he does in the manga. Urahara's conversation is also cut short in the anime after he tells Ichigo that they cannot steal his Bankai, and he is about to actually explain the reason for this, but then Kilge appears. Now, this happens very differently in the manga, as he actually says that he can't say for certain why Ichigo's Bankai cannot be stolen, but he knows that the enemy had only attacked the Soul Society because they were aware that Ichigo was in Huecomundo. This whole dialogue where Urahara tells Ichigo that the Quincy are cautious of Ichigo is cut from the anime, including Urahara saying that he will be joining Ichigo in the Soul Society shortly. The anime, on the other hand, just has Kilge reappear, seal the Senkaimon, attack Chad, Orihime and Urahara while trapping Ichigo in a cage. With Ichigo trapped within Kilge's prison and the Bankai stolen of the 4 captains, we have reached the end of episode 4 of the anime. We are actually beginning to understand the direction of this adaptation of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, as not everything is being adapted and the moments that are cut are stated elsewhere, or that they were not important for the progression of the plot in the first place, so that's why they weren't included. Now, I love the 2 minutes of anime-only fighting where we got to see the captains briefly use their Shikai against the Sternritters. It was so satisfying to see Byakuya actually land a hit against Asnod. So overall, we had about 5 chapters of material adapted into this episode, and I definitely think that this was the best episode that we have had thus far. I loved the pacing, music, voice acting, animation, and of course there was some incredible visuals throughout. There were some scenes where I had goosebumps, in particular when Hitsugaya had yelled out his Zanpakuto's name and the captains had reacted to the Bankai being stolen. It was all done very flawlessly in my opinion. In the end, I want to know what all of you thought about the 1000-Year Blood War arc episode 4. Do you like or dislike the changes, cuts and additions that are being made to the episode? I would love for all of you to continue the discussion in the comments and let me know all of your thoughts on this latest installment of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. Lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I can't wait to see you in my next Bleach video. If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.